have a seat, because we were thinking that the theaters of Europe that are within the ETC, many of our houses have operas as well, since we are several branches theaters, but also we can learn a lot from each other, since we are running venues that are having live performances, and especially also that we can see how we can reach audiences differently with joint knowledge and sharing information and sharing also what you've learned so far and how we can connect better. And I think for this we decided, let's team up on a strategic partnership that I would really, like to inform you now here that we are planning to work together in the future, closer, to get to know each other and each other's work. And I would like to ask you, tell us a little bit about your work that you did in Opera Europa and also what you've learned with your big opera platform so far.
14 years ago, Opera Europa was a small association with 38 opera house members, with a little office in a disused military base in Strasbourg, with half a secretary, and it was in effect managed by a board of opera directors who were far too busy to manage it. Today, as a result of the decision of those directors to professionalize it and engage a small executive team, we have 170 members in 42 countries. The majority of them are, of course, within the European Union, but you can work out that some of those countries are outside the European Union, and we deliberately take a pretty wide view of what Europe is. I give you that little bit of history simply to say, why has the association expanded to that extent over the last decade or more? And I think there are two big answers. The first is that in times of trouble, people do come together. And I guess that initially it was simply, how can we afford to make enough productions? Okay, we better team up and network and make some co-productions. And then people find that actually you don't just want to talk about co-productions. And I was going to say this is something that is more prevalent in the opera field than in the spoken theatre, until I've just seen those three presentations, which are all about co-productions. So clearly you're much more ahead of it than I had imagined. But what we discovered was that actually there are many other areas where sharing information can help better practice, whether it is to do with technical matters or marketing or labor relations or whatever. And as a result, we now have two big events a year, and Dubravka and Heidi came to our last one in Berlin, which was where they approached me about the possibility of a strategic partnership. And in Berlin, as in Amsterdam before, we had probably 400 delegates. What we've added to those is several much smaller meetings where specialist groups, there are now 8 or 10 of them, can sit down in smaller groups in a circle and discuss in greater depth issues that they've got. And I've just come this morning from Amsterdam, where our human resources group had a very interesting debate yesterday about change management. When Dubravka and Heidi approached me about this possibility, it took me about 5 minutes to say yes, because it was obvious to me that we are in the same business. Opera has a lot of pretensions, but actually it's simply theatre, or rather not quite simply theatre. There are some musicians who pretend that it isn't theatre, of course, but it is. All the great composers, from Monteverdi through Mozart and Wagner and Verdi, thought of it as theatre, as drama. But it's, I suppose, theatre plus, because it's theatre with music. And by with music, I don't mean a film soundtrack. I mean music that actually creates the drama. But we are in the same business, and we're not in a competitive business. And being in Germany makes me more aware than in any other country of how interlinked they are, because of the wonderful tradition in Germany of the Dreispartenhaus or the Vierspartenhaus, where you program together opera and dance and spoken theatre and all manner of other things. And the purpose of it is to come together to offer your population a complete cultural experience, a choice. The second thing, which I think explains the expansion of Opera Europa over the last decade, is the internet. When I think about it now, I couldn't possibly have done the job I do 20 years ago. Probably even 10 years ago. It was pretty basic. But what the internet has meant, that time changes and distance don't really matter. It is quite easy for me to communicate with my members in Minsk or Kiev or Athens. And that in turn has enabled us to provide a number of services which aren't based on coming together in conferences and going to the expense and inconvenience of flight delays and all those kind of things, that you develop databases and other online activities which you can share, some of which completely openly, and anyone can log on to them. Others where the information is sensitive through password protection, if it's talking about future plans or detailed budgets or whatever. But it means that there's this big international community able to communicate on a daily basis as well as every six months or so. The next step from that, and you, I'm sure, are already ahead of me, is that this is also a way of speaking and engaging with our audiences. I wholeheartedly agree with what Barbara Gessler was saying at the beginning, that the development of online activities for opera or drama is not in any sense a replacement of live theatre. It complements it. In fact, it doesn't just complement it, it aids and abets it. And the evidence is, despite those who like to pretend that all technology is going to be the death of theatre, and those people have existed since the creation of the gramophone in the early years of the 20th century, or television. It was always going to be the end of live theatre, wasn't it? And the funny thing was not only was it not the end of live theatre, it was the major factor in democratizing live theatre. It made it much more widely available. It is possible for people today, this is very old-fashioned, I know. I mean, I still play vinyl records, and I have a big CD collection. My kids don't. Actually, my elder son has now gone back to vinyl, but because it's better quality. But of course, you can find things on YouTube. You can find things in all manner of things. And the purpose of our opera platform which is free online. All you have to do is to put in the operaplatform.eu, and there it is. The choice is available to you for free. We are providing a European opera season for everybody. And it's not even just for Europe, because the beauty of the World Wide Web is the worldwide bit of it. And so you find that actually we have an audience in the United States and Southern America and Korea and Ukraine, and because you can't stop it getting out. The experiment with the opera platform, which is in a way a precursor of what you're doing, although yours is subtly different in a way that I find very interesting, was dreamt up 3.5 years ago, and it was made possible, and I cannot stress this too much, by the investment of Creative Europe, through the European Commission. It would not have happened without the injection of funds from them. And we are enormously grateful to them for, in a way, backing what was an experiment. At the same time, I would, and without wishing to take anything away from the EC, I would say it happened because of the investment of the participating companies. We had 17 partners. You can imagine the fun it was bringing all that together. Opera Europa, my organization, was the coordinating partner. Arte, the cultural broadcaster, developed and hosted the player, and was an active partner right from the very beginning. And we had 15 opera house theatre partners. What was interesting about that, and I don't know whether this is perhaps something that you can also learn from, was we deliberately, of course, chose them from as many different European countries as we possibly could. It was 15 theatres from 12 different countries. And deliberately we chose some who already had experience in digital work, Royal Opera House, Vienna State Opera, Teatro Real in Madrid, some of the big boys. But we deliberately also chose those who had no experience at all, because the scheme was about capacity building. And if I'm to be honest, I would say that, pleased though I am to have had the giants like Covent Garden and Wiener Staatsoper on board, the thing that gladdens my heart most is Teatro Regio Torino or Polish National Opera, Latvian National Opera, doing it for the first time. The Komische Oper in Berlin daring to film live the first night of a new production, never having done it before, with all the possibility that it was going to be a complete catastrophe. But of course, that's what created the buzz. And it's in a way what we love about live theatre, isn't it? Tonight we don't even know whether the woman's going to be able to sing Adriana Lucavera. It makes it more exciting. Not for you, but it's part of the buzz. It's like going to a football match. You don't know who's going to win. You've got to be there. And what we have discovered, we initially got a commitment out of these partners who put their own money in. Incidentally, the EC money cannot be more than 50% and is in effect, because of the investment of all the partners, less than 50%. And they've taken the risk of doing it because they believe in the project. We are almost at the 2-year mark after the launch of the program. The number of views so far is slightly in excess of 2.8 million. And I am determined we're going to hit 3 million by the second anniversary on the 8th of May. And I think we've got a pretty good chance of achieving that. And one of the ways we're going to achieve it is I've been throwing new new material at it, because we discover that every time you add something new, especially when it's live, there is a spike in the viewing figures. And it's like any online activity. If it's left with nothing happening for a few days, people stop watching. I mean, there's nothing more boring than going back to a website and finding it's the same as the previous time. So we were throwing extra things at it to make it a bit more exciting. We are at the moment in the process of planning stage 2, and not content with having 15 theatre partners, we are envisaging having 30 theatre partners in stage 2. And the idea of that, of course, is to make it happen more widely, to offer a wider European opera season from more countries, and a greater choice of material. Some of it rather popular material, some of it fairly unusual and recondite. And again, the thing that really gladdens me is not the figures we get for La Traviata and for Carmen, which is easy enough to predict, but the fact that for a contemporary piece by Thomas Adis, we got 40,000 viewers. For a rare Polish opera, we got 75,000 viewers, a lot of them outside Poland, and who would never have had the chance of seeing this opera otherwise. So that's quite exciting. What can we share as part of our strategic partnership? Do you want to interrupt? I suppose, first of all, we're in the same business, and I think we can share experiences. I've already learnt quite a bit this afternoon just listening to the 3 projects. And I think we are very willing at Opera Europa to share our experiences, good and bad, with you.
That's exactly what we also had in mind when we started discussing. If we want to collaborate, how can it be as concrete as possible so that we immediately also get into touch with each other? And what we decided is that the continuation of our talks here today and tomorrow, they will be going on in October in Tbilisi, in Georgia, with our colleagues from the Kota National Theatre over there. Jeka and Nutsa are here with us, when we want to explore also the big topic that we haven't been able to touch upon here now because it's simply too much, on live streaming and digital audiences. What is available, and where we will have a workshop also with your colleagues on the Opera Europa platform, but also to see what are different mechanisms that work well, different channels, how to produce maybe differently, also what we heard from Dieter from Arte this morning, in making different formats available to different types of audiences, so that this is a whole new area that we want to explore. Of course, copyright issues are something to discuss in this whole sense, and that's why we're also quite happy to have a third partner, which is not here now with us, but through our colleagues from the Deutsche Bühnenverein, we are collaborating with Pearl, the European umbrella organization of all the theatrical and orchestras and opera houses of Europe. And together we want not just to have capacity building workshops on those issues linked to data exchange and audience building and engaging possibilities, but also we said next year is going to be the European Cultural Heritage Year, to celebrate European cultural heritage. And what better way to make visible that the theaters and the operas of Europe work together and open their houses every day to the public, where everyone can go inside and experience a live moment of enjoy, of performance, of sensational, magic very often. That doesn't happen in festivals where you only have once in a year the moment to see this, but where you have this every day in front of your doorstep, where you are part of building the heritage, the identities that makes the community that you live in, and that you can take also stock and belong to. And for this we want to make a celebration of the cultural, live performing arts. And you want to maybe continue on this? On how we want to do this?
I think I'm not very clever. Three points which you raise a brief comeback up at, and in a way they are quite good examples of where we can show you good practice and bad practice. Audiences. I think where we have been successful is finding an audience for complete live stream operas. Of course, not everyone watches all 3 hours, we know that. The average watch is probably 25 minutes. And that includes the person who switches it straight off and the person who sits through the whole of Götterdämmerung. But people like the live show, and they come back to it if they want to see the second act or whatever it is later. This is partly because that's what we've concentrated on, and it's partly because it's what our partner Arte really believe in. They believed in that and not in other things. I think relatively we have failed to do short-term material well. I'm sure it can be done better. We've done a bit. And you know, there's some good short pieces, but I think we can do better on that. And I'm quite sure that in stage 2 and in your stage 1, one of the reasons we're both into this is the new audience, isn't it? I mean, that's the holy grail of the whole thing. How do we reach those people? What do they want? What do we want to get them with? And that really does affect content. And I think we need, as you seem already to be, more creative about it and actually use the medium in order to transform what theatre and what opera is. Not to dumb it down, but to take it to a future stage. Copyright. I would say, and we started 3 years ago on this in our negotiations, we have been fairly successful in persuading the performers that they should give their services for this free service. I have agreements with representatives of them, and in most cases, there are 1 or 2 exceptions where people object to it, but not enough to stop us doing it. We have succeeded in getting their agreement because they buy into the fact that actually it is getting their stuff to a wider audience, which in turn justifies the support, private and public, that goes into putting on opera and theatre in the first place. Where we've been less successful is in copyright, with the publishers, the editors of the material. I won't say we've had no success, because we have, and there have been some nasty set twos where we have failed to reach agreement, and we've therefore taken the thing off the screen and replaced it with something more boring. I think we're going to win. And it's quite interesting. I had a very difficult meeting in Berlin with 6 of the toughest publishers who came to give me 2 hours of a hard time. And I gave them a hard time back. And we agreed to meet again when we discussed it all with our colleagues and so on. Meanwhile, of course, I've been building up case history. And I would say to people, this is, of course, not a precedent, by which I mean I'm going to make this a precedent. And we have some quite good case history, and it's quite interesting that when I offered another meeting, they put it off. And I think this shows that they're slightly in retreat. It doesn't mean that we'll win everything, but I think it's a really important thing. And again, what I would say is I recognize that the author does have rights. Of course they do. It's, you know, they've created the material. And the interesting dilemma for the digital age is how we reconcile protecting the rights of the author with the need to provide a cultural offer to the widest possible public. So that's yes, kind of ongoing.
But I think we can only gain in becoming stronger together and also increase the lobby work and the advocacy for this purpose. Yes, and then very lastly, what we want to do next year with the celebration of the European cultural heritage in operas and
that was going to be my third
theatres.
point, and
that
I'd
was going to
forgotten
be
it,
your third point.
You beautifully prompted me. I think it is a fantastic opportunity, and not only because of the support of European Creative Europe and the Commission, but it is something we want to do in a very active way. It's not just a historical drama began with Aeschylus. Let's go through the ages. Although we want to do Aeschylus, we want to do Peer Gynt, we want to do Monteverdi and so on. It's how we make that heritage belong to the diverse, multicultural Europe that we now live in today, isn't it? And that is a real challenge, and I think it is something that it would be wonderful if we can work together on. I don't pretend that everyone should love opera. I think there are a lot of people who would love opera if they gave it a try, but that's not 100% of the nation. And I think opera is part of the choice, and there are many other kinds of theatre which are also part of the choice, and we can work together to share information about audiences and share information about delivery to those audiences.
Exactly, and to show the variety and diversity of what is available to all of us on our European stages, and if possibly it can be turned into something like the Fête de la Musique for the operas and the theatres, that is also considered to be really part of our lives, then we would be. I mean,
I should just finally say, because Mark mentioned it, we are also members of Pearl.
I know.
And I was part of the conversation in Zurich last November. And there will be an ongoing discussion about that. And I think it is really important that the German theatres and the Deutsche Bühnenverein take a tough and consistent line over this, because there is no doubt that the editors and the publishers will target Germany as their battleground.
Yes, and I think the more it is important that we are teaming up on this and see how we can take it forward. With this, I would say thank you, Nicholas, for now. If there are no more questions right now, I would have a look at our...
We're late, aren't we? Look, what I would say is I'm here for the rest of the afternoon and evening if anyone wants to ask me about anything, and I'm looking forward to hearing more from you.
Oh yes, we will. Thank you.